This week, the city of Nairobi officially became the command center for a massive and permanent geopolitical realignment. Over 1,500 corporate executives and 30 heads of state gathered here at the Africa Forward Summit to formally dismantle the colonial warehouse model. For decades, standard operating procedure treated the continent as a vast extraction site, a place where raw materials were dug out of the earth and shipped abroad to be processed, leaving the actual wealth behind. Reversing a century of extraction depends on the physical reconfiguration of supply chains and capital flows across 54 nations. Achieving independence requires executing 3 strict rules to complete what policymakers are calling the sovereign shift. Rule 1 is industrial sovereignty. Leaders like President Ruto have drawn a hard line, demanding strategic partnerships where African nations act as architects of modern industry, rather than passive suppliers. This translates directly into the mineral mandate. The policy ends the export of unrefined dirt, replacing it with strict requirements for local heavy industrialization and export diversification. This chart shows the economic gap between selling raw ore and selling finished goods. Exporting raw lithium generates a fraction of the capital compared to manufacturing and exporting fully assembled battery packs. To capture that missing revenue, governments are internalizing the entire process. They are building local refineries, subsidizing component manufacturing, and securing local assembly plants so the highest margin steps never cross the border. By keeping the manufacturing nodes local, these nations force foreign markets to buy finished products rather than raw materials, reversing the historical dependency. While diplomats handle the policy, bankers at the GTR East Africa Trade Gathering are building the infrastructure to fund it. This is Rule 2, financial sovereignty, the digital plumbing needed to keep capital local. This map illustrates the core flaw in the international financial architecture. Historically, domestic savings and trade revenues were funneled outward into foreign institutions, draining the capital required for local growth. Financial leaders are actively repiping these flows. By updating supply chain finance mechanics and integrating modern environmental and social governance frameworks, they are creating closed-loop banking networks that capture and retain private local capital. With local capital mobilized, domestic developers can finance large-scale infrastructure and industrial hubs without relying on heavily conditioned, high-interest foreign trade loans. Financial sovereignty is defined by the engineering of a closed-loop system where 100% of domestic wealth stays on the continent to fund domestic growth. The third rule is reality sovereignty. The front lines of this shift are stationed inside academic institutions like the University of Nairobi. Reality sovereignty recognizes a rule of the modern economy. The entities that train the artificial intelligence models and control the datasets ultimately dictate the cultural narrative and the economic reality of the people using them. To secure this layer, new digital literacy hubs are training the continent's massive youth demographic to build proprietary algorithms. Millions of students are shifting from passive consumers of foreign tech into active developers of native artificial intelligence. Owning the digital layer acts as the protective shield for the new African economy, ensuring that physical and financial gains are not undermined by outsourced data. Industrializing minerals, repiping capital, and owning the code. The Africa Forward Summit produced an actionable blueprint for economic interdependence. This creates a zero-sum environment for legacy markets. Foreign organizations waiting for a return to the old extraction models risk being bypassed as the supply chain integrates locally. By combining an industrial renaissance with localized capital and native AI, this continent is positioning itself as a global epicenter for industrial innovation and manufacturing. These shifts force every international business leader to ask, if the global power dynamic is moving this fast, who is actually owning the narrative of your brand's future? The boardroom has shifted. You now have a choice. Become an architect of this new partnership or remain a passenger in a system that no longer exists.